The scent hit Sarah before anything else. Sweat, fear, and something darker that made her stomach clench. Blood. Fresh and metallic, carried on the evening wind that swept through the valley settlement of Thornhaven. She shouldn't be here. The weekly pack gathering was for full-blooded wolves, not half-breeds like her. Not the bastard daughter of a wolf who'd abandoned his human lover before Sarah had taken her first breath. But Magistrate Oren had summoned her specifically, his letter arriving 3 days ago with the royal seal pressed into red wax. Your expertise is required. Come at sunset. Do not refuse. Sarah clutched her healer's satchel tighter as she pushed through the crowd gathering in the central square. Wolves, dozens of them in human form, pressed close on all sides, their eyes gleaming with an excitement that felt predatory. She kept her gaze down, trying to make herself small, invisible. Don't look at them. Don't let them see you're afraid. Make way, a guard barked, and the crowd parted reluctantly. That's when Sarah saw the cage. It sat in the center of the square, iron bars dark with rust and stained with something she didn't want to identify. Inside, a man knelt on the metal floor, wrists shackled to the bars above his head. Even hunched and bound, his size was staggering, easily taller than any wolf in the crowd, with shoulders broad enough that the cage seemed barely able to contain him. "Mama, what's happening?" A small voice piped up nearby. "Hush, Kenna, don't look at him." But Sarah couldn't look away. The prisoner's dark hair hung in matted tangles around his face, obscuring his features, but she could see the marks of prolonged captivity. Bruises mottled his bare torso in shades of purple and yellow. Fresh cuts crisscrossed his back. And there, on his left shoulder, a wound that made Sarah's healer instincts flare with alarm. The flesh around it was wrong. Not infected in any normal way, but corrupted. Dark veins spreading from the puncture site like cracks in glass, pulsing with a sickly silver sheen that seemed to move beneath his skin. Silver root poisoning, Sarah realized with a chill. They've been dosing him with silver root. The poison was meant for killing wolves who'd gone feral, attacking them from the inside out. Humans called it mercy. Wolves called it agony. Sarah had heard of it but never seen it used. The settlement's healers weren't permitted near prisoners deemed threats to the crown. "Citizens of Thornhaven!" Magistrate Oren's voice boomed across the square. He stood on the raised platform beside the cage, his gray beard precisely trimmed, his official robes immaculate despite the evening heat. "Before you sits a rogue, a wolf without pack, without king, without law." The crowd rumbled with approval. "He was found trespassing on royal hunting grounds," Oren continued, "attacking the king's guard, resisting lawful authority." He paused, letting the charges sink in. "The penalty for such crimes is death." Sarah's breath caught. She glanced at the prisoner, expecting panic or pleading. Instead, he simply breathed, slow, measured breaths that suggested either acceptance or complete dissociation from the world around him. However, Oren smiled coldly. "His Majesty, in his infinite mercy, offers an alternative. Work contract or death. The choice is yours, good people. Who will take responsibility for this beast?" Silence fell over the square, heavy and expectant. "Come now." Oren's voice took on a mocking edge. "He's strong. Look at the size of him. Think of the labor you could extract." "If the silver root doesn't kill him first," someone called out. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sarah felt her hands clench around her satchel strap. 4 gold marks, Oren announced. A bargain for such a specimen. No one moved. The prisoner swayed slightly in his chains, and Sarah saw his chest hitch, a suppressed cough that spoke of internal damage. The poison was already in his lungs. "He has days at most," she thought. "Maybe hours." 3 gold marks. Oren's voice sharpened with frustration. "Surely someone—" A rock flew from the crowd, striking the cage with a metallic clang. The prisoner didn't flinch, but Sarah did. More objects followed: rotten fruit, stones, a broken bottle that shattered against the bars. "Rogue filth! Should have killed him when they found him." The jeering grew louder, uglier. Sarah watched the prisoner's shoulders tense, the only sign that he registered the abuse. When his head finally lifted just slightly, she caught a glimpse of his face. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw dark with stubble, and eyes, even from this distance, even in the fading light, that burned with a fierce, unbroken defiance. Something in Sarah's chest twisted painfully. 2 gold marks, Oren practically shouted now. My final offer. Sarah pressed forward without thinking, her body moving before her mind could catch up. Her healer's oath was pounding in her ears. Do no harm, turn away no one in need, preserve life above all. 1 gold mark, Oren spat. 1 gold mark and he's yours, or I end this farce now and… I'll take him. The words left Sarah's mouth in a rush, barely louder than a whisper, but in the sudden silence they rang like a bell. Every eye in the square turned to her. Sarah felt their stares like physical weight, felt the exact moment they registered what she was. Half-breed. Outsider. Other. You? Oren's lip curled. The healer girl? Sarah forced herself to meet his gaze, though her knees trembled. 1 gold mark. You said final offer. She reached into her satchel with shaking hands, fingers closing around the small purse that held her meager savings from 2 years of healing work, barely enough for winter supplies. This is madness, the rational part of her brain screamed. You don't have the resources, you don't have the authority. But her hands were already moving, pulling out the single gold coin, holding it up for all to see. I claim him, Sarah said, her voice stronger now. According to royal law. Oren's face flushed red above his beard. You can't possibly think… The law is clear, magistrate. Sarah took the final steps to the platform, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break her ribs. 1 gold mark buys the contract. I'm offering payment. For a long moment, Oren simply stared at her, his eyes promising retribution. Then he snatched the coin from her palm with enough force to make her stumble. So be it, he hissed. When he dies screaming from the poison in his veins, remember you chose this. He threw a key ring at Sarah's feet. She bent to retrieve it, her hand still trembling as she approached the cage. Up close, the prisoner was even more imposing. Even kneeling, his head was level with hers. She could see the details now, the way sweat beaded on his forehead despite the evening chill, the rapid flutter of his pulse in his throat, the slight glaze over those defiant eyes that spoke of fever. I'm going to unlock the cage, Sarah said quietly, not sure if he could even understand her. Please, don't make me regret this. His eyes found hers, and for one breathless moment Sarah felt like she was falling. There was intelligence there, sharp and assessing, but also something wild and vast that made her wolf blood sing in recognition. Impossible, she thought. I'm barely half-wolf. I shouldn't be able to feel… The key turned in the lock with a rusty shriek. Sarah pulled open the cage door, her breath coming fast and shallow. The prisoner didn't move. His gaze held hers as she reached up to unlock the shackles binding his wrists. The moment the chains fell away, he collapsed forward. Sarah caught him on instinct, her small frame buckling under his weight as they both crashed to the platform floor. The crowd erupted in jeers and laughter, but Sarah barely heard them over the rasp of the prisoner's breathing against her shoulder. Can you walk? She whispered urgently. Please, I need you to walk. His response was a low sound that might have been assent. With tremendous effort, he pushed himself to his knees, then his feet. Sarah ducked under his arm, taking as much of his weight as she could. They moved through the crowd like that, a half-breed healer barely 5.5 feet tall, supporting a poisoned rogue who towered over her. Every step felt like an eternity. Sarah could feel eyes on them, hear whispered comments that made her face burn. Fool girl. Thinks she can save him. Give it 3 days before she's reporting his corpse. Sarah gritted her teeth and kept moving, one foot in front of the other. past the last of the houses, down the dirt path that led away from the settlement proper, toward the small cottage she'd inherited from her mother. The prisoner's weight grew heavier with each step. His breathing turned ragged, then whistling. By the time Sarah's cottage came into view, a humble structure with a thatched roof and herb garden out front, he was barely conscious. Almost there, Sarah panted, her own legs shaking. Just a little further. They reached her door. Sarah fumbled with the latch, got it open, and together they stumbled inside. The prisoner's legs gave out completely in her small front room. He fell to his knees with a heavy thud, then forward onto his hands. Sarah heard him trying to speak. Words in a language she didn't recognize, rough and urgent. "I don't understand," she said, kneeling beside him. "I'm sorry. I don't—" He looked up at her one last time. Even dying, even poisoned beyond hope, his eyes burned with something that made Sarah's breath catch. Then they rolled back, and he collapsed face first onto her floor. Sarah pressed her fingers to his neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, but weak and erratic. Have I lost my mind? The thought echoed as she stared down at the massive stranger who now lay unconscious in her home. She'd spent her last gold on a rogue wolf who would probably die before morning. She'd marked herself as fool or worse in front of the entire settlement. But even as doubt crept in, Sarah was already moving. She grabbed her healer's satchel, pulled out clean cloths and her herb supplies, and knelt beside the dying wolf. "You don't get to die yet," she told him fiercely. "Not after I spent my last coin on you. Do you hear me? You don't get to die." Her hands went to the silver root wound, and the moment her fingers touched the corrupted flesh, Sarah gasped. The poison wasn't just killing him. It was fighting something else. Something ancient and powerful that pulsed beneath his skin like a second heartbeat. Power. Raw and primal and so potent it made her half-blood sing with recognition. And beneath that, she felt her own magic stir. That buried gift she'd inherited from her mother's line. The healing magic she'd spent her whole life pretending was just herbal knowledge. "What are you?" she wondered, staring at the unconscious rogue. But there was no time for questions. The poison was winning. Sarah took a deep breath and began to work, knowing that by morning, everything in her carefully controlled life would have changed forever. The night stretched endlessly. Sarah worked by candlelight, her hands moving with practiced efficiency even as exhaustion threatened to drag her under. She'd cleaned the silver root wound 3 times now, each time watching in dismay as the dark veins continued to spread despite her best efforts. What had been confined to his shoulder now crept visibly toward his heart, the corruption advancing with each passing hour. Nothing worked, not the purging poultices her mother had taught her to make. Not the healing salves that usually drew poison from wounds. Not even the expensive moon petal extract she'd been saving for emergencies. The silver root was winning. "Come on," Sarah muttered, grinding fresh herbs in her mortar with desperate force. "There has to be something." The rogue lay where he'd fallen, his breathing shallow and labored. His fever had spiked an hour ago, and now sweat soaked his skin despite the cool night air. Occasionally, he would murmur something in that unfamiliar language, words that sounded like prayers or curses. Sarah applied another poultice to the wound, her own hands trembling with fatigue. As she worked, her fingers brushed against his bare shoulder, and suddenly the world tilted. Heat. Moonlight. Running through endless forests with pack at her flanks. The scent of pine and snow and freedom. A howl rising in her throat, pure and wild and— Sarah jerked her hand back, gasping. Her heart raced, her skin flushed hot, then cold. What was that? She stared at the unconscious rogue, pulse hammering in her throat. For just a moment she'd felt something impossible. His memories, his emotions, the essence of what he was bleeding into her through that simple touch. "I'm just tired," Sarah told herself firmly, though her hands still shook, exhausted and imagining things. But when she forced herself to touch him again, checking his pulse, adjusting his position, there it was. That electric current running beneath his skin, calling to something deep in her own blood. The half of her that was Wolf recognized him, wanted him, needed him in a way that terrified her. Sarah snatched her hand back again and stood abruptly, putting distance between herself and the dying stranger. Get it together. He's just another patient. But none of her other patients had felt like this. None had made her skin prickle with awareness, made her breath come faster, made her want to. A sound from the doorway made Sarah spin around. Her neighbor, Widow Maris, stood in the entrance with a basket of bread. The elderly woman's eyes went wide as she took in the scene. The massive mail sprawled across Sarah's floor, the blood-stained cloths, and the obvious marks of silverroot poisoning. "Sarah?" Maris breathed. "What have you done?" "He was dying," Sarah said, lifting her chin despite the judgment she saw forming. "I couldn't just—" "That's a rogue wolf," Maris interrupted, stepping inside and closing the door quickly behind her. "Do you have any idea what you've brought into your home? Someone who needed help. Someone who could kill you the moment he wakes." Maris set down the basket with more force than necessary. "If he wakes, girl, that's silverroot poisoning. He's as good as dead." Sarah's jaw tightened. "Then it doesn't matter what he is, does it?" Maris studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "Your mother had that same stubborn streak. It's what got her killed." She moved to the rogue's side, kneeling with a grunt. "Let me see the wound." Together, they worked through the darkest hours of the night. Maris had knowledge Sarah lacked. Old wolf remedies passed down through generations, treatments that weren't taught to half-breeds. Maris herself was full-blooded wolf, one of the few in Thornhaven who'd shown Sarah's mother kindness despite her choice to love a human. But even combined with Sarah's healer training and her secret magic, nothing seemed to make a difference. As dawn approached, the rogue's breathing grew more labored. The dark veins had spread across his entire chest now, reaching toward his neck like grasping fingers. "Sarah," Maris said quietly, "it's time to let him go." "No." The word came out sharper than Sarah intended. "There has to be something else." "There isn't." Maris placed a weathered hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Sometimes mercy is knowing when to stop fighting." But Sarah couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Every instinct she possessed screamed at her to save him, as if her own survival somehow depended on his. "Go home, Maris," Sarah said. "Get some rest. I'll keep watch." The widow left reluctantly, promising to return at midday. Sarah barely noticed her departure. She was too focused on the dying wolf, on the impossible pull she felt toward him, on the terrible certainty that if he died, something essential would die with him. "This doesn't make sense," she thought. "You don't even know his name." But her hands kept working, kept trying, kept fighting against the inevitable. Near dawn, the rogue's fever spiked dangerously. His muscles went rigid, back arching off the floor. A sound tore from his throat, half human scream, half animal howl, that made Sarah's blood run cold. "No, no, no." She pressed her hands to his chest, trying to hold him still. "Don't you dare. Don't you—" His eyes snapped open. Except they weren't eyes anymore. They were pure liquid gold, glowing in the dim candlelight like twin suns, and they fixed on Sarah with an intensity that stole her breath. The rogue moved faster than should have been possible. One moment he was flat on his back, the next his hand was locked around Sarah's wrist in a grip like iron. He pulled her down with impossible strength, bringing her face close to his. "Please," Sarah gasped, fear and something else flooding through her. "I'm trying to help." He inhaled deeply, his nose nearly touching her throat. The sound he made then was inhuman, a deep resonant rumble that vibrated through Sarah's entire body. Purring, she realized with shock. He's purring. The sun-bright eyes studied her face with desperate focus, as if memorizing every feature. Then he spoke, his voice raw and rough, words in his own tongue that Sarah's rational mind couldn't understand, but something deeper. something connected to her wolf blood and her magic, translated instinctively. Mine. The word resonated in her bones, in her blood, in the hidden wolf nature she'd always suppressed. Before she could respond, his other hand came up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and everywhere he touched left trails of fire on her skin. "I don't understand," Sarah whispered, though her body was responding in ways that terrified her. Her heart raced, her breath came short, and heat pooled low in her belly. The rogue leaned closer, his breath hot, against her throat. For one frozen moment, Sarah thought he might kiss her. Instead, he pressed his face into the curve of her neck and simply breathed her in, that deep rumbling purr growing louder. Then his lips parted, and his teeth found her flesh. The pain was instant and shocking, sharp canines piercing skin and muscle, sinking deep. Sarah tried to scream, but the sound caught in her throat, emerging as little more than a whimper. She should have fought, should have pulled away. But the rogue's arm had wrapped around her waist like a steel band, holding her immobile against his chest. And then the pain changed. Heat flooded through her from the bite site, rushing through her veins like liquid fire. Sarah's vision blurred, her body going limp in his arms. The fever that had been consuming him now poured into her, but it wasn't destroying. It was transforming. She could feel him everywhere, not just his body pressed against hers, but his presence flooding into her mind, his essence twining with hers like roots growing together beneath the earth. "What's happening?" she thought desperately, but the question dissolved as sensation overwhelmed thought. The rogue's tongue moved against her throat, rough and warm, lapping at the blood. Each touch sent another wave of that impossible heat through her system. Sarah's hands, which had been pushing weakly at his shoulders, now clutched at him instead, unsure if she was trying to pull away or draw closer. His purr intensified, and she felt his pleasure, satisfaction, relief, and underneath it all, a fierce possessive joy that made no sense. Time lost meaning. Sarah floated in a haze of sensation and confusion, anchored only by the feeling of his mouth on her throat and his arms holding her like she was the most precious thing in existence. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The rogue's golden eyes rolled back, and he collapsed, taking Sarah down with him. They landed in a tangle of limbs, his dead weight pinning her to the floor. Sarah lay there gasping, her hand pressed to her bleeding throat. The wound throbbed in time with her racing heartbeat, but already she could feel it starting to close, healing faster than should be possible. What did he do to me? But before she could process the question, another sensation hit her. Pain, deep and primal, starting in her bones and radiating outward. Her spine arched, muscles seizing. "No," Sarah whimpered, recognizing what was happening. "Please, not now. Not." The shift tried to take her. She'd only shifted once before, on her 16th birthday when the moon had been full and her wolf blood had finally awakened. It had been agony then. Her body not quite human and not quite wolf, caught in a painful in-between that had left her unconscious for days. She'd sworn never to shift again, had spent years suppressing that part of herself, pretending she was more human than wolf. But now, her body betrayed her. Bones began to crack and reshape. Sarah's scream tore through the cottage as her spine lengthened, as her jaw started to extend, as silver-white fur began to ripple across her skin. Through the agony, one thought burned clear. Something's wrong. This isn't normal. He did something to me. But there was no time to understand. The shift pulled her under like a riptide, and Sarah fell into darkness still screaming, her clothes tearing as her body tried to become something it had never fully been before. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of burning sage. For a moment she simply lay there, disoriented. Her body ached in ways she'd never experienced. Core-deep muscle soreness that spoke of extreme exertion. Her mouth tasted of copper and ash. Then memory slammed into her. The bite, the shift, the rogue. Sarah sat up with a gasp, her hand flying to her throat. The skin there was tender but whole, not even a scar remaining. She looked down to find herself naked, her torn clothes scattered around her like shed skin. The cottage was empty. The rogue was gone. No. Sarah scrambled for the blanket, wrapping it around herself. Where? He's in your garden. Widow Maris's voice came from the kitchen doorway. The elderly woman appeared with 2 steaming mugs. Has been since before dawn? He's alive? Very much so. Maris set down 1 mug, her expression carefully neutral. Care to explain why there's a half-shifted rogue wolf guarding your herb beds? Sarah moved to the window on unsteady legs. There, seated among her medicinal plants, was the rogue. The silver root poison was gone completely. But his eyes were still gold. Not human blue or brown, but that impossible burning gold that caught the morning light. His hands showed lengthened fingers tipped with dark claws. He won't come inside, Maris said quietly. I tried to approach once. She showed fresh bruises on her arm. He made it clear I wasn't to come near until you woke. Sarah's mind raced. Half-shifted wolves were dangerous, unable to control the transformation. But this looked deliberate, protective. I need to talk to him, Sarah said. Wait. Maris caught her arm. That mark on your neck. It's gone now, but I saw it earlier. I know what a claiming bite looks like. Sarah's blood ran cold. That's impossible. I'm half human. Should have killed you, Maris agreed grimly, but didn't, which means he's powerful enough to force a bond with a half-breed. That's alpha bloodline, girl. Maybe higher. Sarah grabbed a dress, pulled it on quickly, and opened the door. The rogue's head snapped up, those flame-bright eyes locking onto her. Then he was on his feet, crossing the garden in 3 strides. Up close, she could see him trembling as if holding himself back through sheer will. His nostrils flared, and that deep purr started in his chest. You bit me, Sarah said, steadying her voice. Last night. He reached out slowly. When she didn't pull away, his fingers touched her throat where the mark had been, his claws. Retracted with visible effort. The moment his skin contacted hers, that electric current hit, stronger now. Relief, protectiveness, possessive satisfaction flooded from him into her. I don't understand what you did, Sarah continued. That bite tried to make me shift. I could have died. Anguish flashed across his features. He started to pull back, but Sarah caught his wrist. Wait. I need to know if it'll happen again. He spoke then, a single word in that musical language. But through whatever connection he'd forged, Sarah understood its meaning. Sorry. She stared. How did I? He placed his palm against her chest, over her heart. Then tapped his own chest, wolf gold eyes holding hers. Connected. Bonded. One. No, Sarah breathed. That's not possible. I'm half human. A loud knock on the garden gate interrupted. Sarah! Magistrate Oren's voice carried across the yard. Open this gate, now. Maris appeared at Sarah's elbow, pale. He's brought guards. 5 of them. The rogue moved instantly between Sarah and the gate, his purr transforming to a threatening growl, muscles coiling, claws extending again. Don't. Sarah grabbed his arm. They're looking for an excuse. Don't give them one. Sarah, Oren called. The law requires you report feral behavior. Half-shifting counts. Sarah's mind raced. If they took him, they'd kill him. He's not feral, she called back. He's controlled. Then open this gate. Sarah looked at the rogue, at his golden eyes and clawed hands, at the wild power barely contained. When I open that gate, you stay calm, she said quietly, hoping he'd understand via their connection. No matter what they say or do. His eyes searched hers. Then slowly, with visible effort, his claws retracted. His posture shifted. Still alert, but no longer openly aggressive. Sarah lifted the latch. Oren stood with 5 armed guards. His expression was smug, anticipatory. There, Sarah said calmly. You're welcome to verify his condition. Oren's eyes narrowed at the scene. The rogue peaceful in the garden, the obvious absence of poison, the clear health and strength. Impossible, he muttered. Why are his eyes gold? Partial shift during extreme healing, Sarah improvised. His body accessed his wolf nature to purge the poison. You expect me to believe he's safe? Oren studied the rogue with barely concealed frustration. He's been nothing but calm, Sarah countered. A young guard spoke up. Magistrate, if she's got him controlled? Silence. Oren's voice cracked like a whip. Contract workers must wear identification at all times. Where's his collar? Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd forgotten the required iron collar. Then I'm confiscating him for contract violation, Oren said with satisfaction. Take him. The rogue's response was immediate. His growl rose to a snarl, lips pulling back to reveal elongated canines. Power shimmered around him. Stand down, Oren barked, or we'll put you down. Guards drew silver-tipped spears. Stop. Sarah threw herself between them. You can't. He's shown aggressive behavior, Oren interrupted coldly. That voids the contract. Immediate execution. A howl split the air. Not from the rogue, but from the forest. Then another answered. And another. Within seconds, the woods echoed with pack calls. Guards shifted nervously. Even Oren's confidence faltered. Packs don't come this close, one guard whispered. But the rogue's snarl faded. He looked toward the forest, eyes brightening, and called back. A sound both howl and something older. Commanding. The forest fell silent. Then wolves emerged from the tree line. Dozens of them, moving with eerie synchronization, forming a circle around Sarah's property. Sweet mercy, Maris breathed. The largest wolf, massive and silver, padded forward. It stopped outside the gate and fixed its gaze on Oren. The magistrate had gone white. This is illegal. Unauthorized pack gathering. The silver wolf's lips pulled back in what looked like a smile. Then it shifted. Bones cracked, fur receding. Within seconds, a woman stood there. Tall and powerful, with silver hair and amber eyes matching the rogue's. Forgive the intrusion, magistrate, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. But you have something that belongs to us. She gestured toward the rogue. He's a contract worker, Oren protested weakly. Legally purchased. By her. The woman's gaze shifted to Sarah with something like respect. The half-breed who paid her last coin to save a dying stranger. Sarah swallowed hard. Who are you? I am Vyra, second of the Northern Pack. And this is Kale, Crown Prince of the Wolf Realm and future Alpha King. The words hung like thunderclaps. Sarah's world tilted. She looked at the rogue, at Kale, and saw truth in his expression. She'd saved royalty who'd claimed her as his mate. Oren seemed to shrink. I didn't know. Reports said he was just a rogue. You poisoned a prince, Vyra said coldly. Caged him. Tortured him. Sold him like chattel. The only reason you still breathe is because Prince Kale hasn't ordered otherwise. All eyes turned to Kale. He stood silent, incandescent gaze moving between Sarah and Vyra. Finally, he spoke in his own language, voice carrying authority. The bond between him and Sarah thrummed, and she caught fragments of meaning. Protected. Mine. Debt of honor. Vyra nodded. The prince says the half-breed has his protection. Anyone who harms her answers to him and the full might of the Northern Pack. She looked at Oren with contempt. Touch her again, and no law will save you. Vyra turned to Kale and spoke rapidly. Sarah felt more through their link. Duty. Father grieves. Pack needs you. Danger. Vyra's expression shifted to surprise, then awe as Kale responded. She looked at Sarah with new eyes and bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect. We must return to Pack territory, Vyra said in common tongue for Sarah's benefit. Your father believes you dead. The Pack mourns, and the king's forces grow bolder. 3 more raids since your capture. Kale's jaw tightened. He looked at Sarah, conflict clear in his eyes. She felt his torn loyalty, duty warring with the need to stay. "You have to go," Sarah said quietly. "Your people need you." Kyle shook his head, reaching for her hand. "She'll be safe," Vira began. "No." Sarah pulled free, stepping back. "I can't leave. This is my home. I have patients who depend on me." She felt Kale's anguish through their link. He spoke urgently in his language. "He says he'll return," Vera translated. "As soon as matters are settled, he'll come back for you. He swears it on his blood and crown." Sarah looked into those burning eyes and saw the truth of it. "Go," she whispered. "Save your people. I'll be here." Kale moved forward, cupping her face. He pressed his forehead to hers and Sarah felt everything. "Mine. Always mine. Wait for me." Then he kissed her forehead and stepped back. As he did, his eyes began to fade from gold back to their natural deep blue, the wolf's fury finally calming, control reasserting itself. Within moments, the pack melted into the forest. Sarah stood in her garden, watching until the last wolf disappeared. Only then did she feel the ache of his absence, a hollow sensation where their link pulled toward someone now miles away. "Well," Maris said. "That was unexpected." Sarah let out a slightly hysterical laugh. "That's one word for it." She looked at her hand, the one Kale had held, and felt the echo of his touch. Their connection thrummed with life, reminding her he existed somewhere in the world, thinking of her, waiting to return. Despite the fear and uncertainty, Sarah found herself smiling. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. 3 weeks had passed since Vera and the Northern Pack had departed, taking Kale with them. 3 weeks of Sarah trying to convince herself life could return to normal, that she could forget the blue-eyed prince who'd claimed her and vanished. 3 weeks of lying to herself. Before the pack left, Sarah had sent word to Widow Maris through Vera, asking her to watch the cottage and her patients while she recovered from what everyone would assume was an illness. The elderly wolf's response had arrived days later, terse. "Come back alive, child. Your garden needs tending." The dreams started on the second night. Vivid, overwhelming dreams where Kale came to her cottage in the darkness, knelt beside her bed, and spoke to her in that liquid language she now understood perfectly through their bond. "Wait for me," he would say, his hand cupping her face with impossible tenderness. "I will return. I swear it." Then she would wake alone, heart racing, skin flushed with heat that had nothing to do with the temperature. The dreams felt more real than her waking hours. She could smell pine and snow on her sheets, could feel the ghost of his touch lingering on her skin. "You're losing your mind," Sarah told her reflection as she dressed for another day of healing work. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She'd lost weight, her appetite vanishing along with her peace of mind. But it wasn't just the dreams. Pain had become her constant companion. It started as a dull ache in her bones, easy to ignore, easy to attribute to overwork. Then it intensified. By the end of the first week, Sarah would collapse without warning, torment tearing through her body as if something inside her was trying to break free. The episodes left her shaking and weak, but always passed within minutes. And each time she woke feeling perfectly fine, as if the pain had been imagined. Except for the growing certainty that something fundamental was changing inside her. "You look terrible," Widow Maris said bluntly when Sarah arrived at her cottage to check on the elderly woman's arthritis. "When's the last time you slept properly?" "I'm fine," Sarah lied, mixing herbs for a pain-relieving tea. "You're not fine. You haven't been fine since that prince left." Maris caught Sarah's wrist, examining her with a healer's critical eye. "The bond is affecting you." Sarah pulled away. "There is no bond. I'm half human. It didn't take." "Then why do you flinch every time someone mentions the Northern Pack? Why do you stare north at sunset like you're waiting for something?" Maris's expression softened. "Child, I can smell him on you still. Whatever he did, it worked." "That's impossible," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Because she could smell him too. pine and snow and something wild that had no name. It clung to her skin, no matter how many times she bathed, wrapped around her like an invisible thread connecting her to something, someone far away. And worse, she could feel him. Not his physical presence, but his emotions bleeding through that impossible connection. Frustration, worry, and underneath it all, a soul-deep longing that mirrored her own. "He's the future Alpha King," Sarah said, finishing the tea with trembling hands. "Even if there was a bond, it doesn't matter. He has responsibilities, a kingdom to rule. He can't—" She stopped as pain lanced through her chest. Not the marrow-deep agony of the episodes, but something sharper. Emotional, rather than physical. Kyle was thinking of her. She knew it with the same certainty she knew her own name. "I have to go," Sarah said abruptly, gathering her things. "Sarah." But she was already out the door, fleeing toward the safety of her cottage and the isolation that couldn't quite keep the ghost of a blue-eyed prince at bay. The summons arrived 5 days later, brought by a royal courier who'd ridden hard from the capital. Sarah stared at the official document, her hands shaking. The royal seal, not the local magistrate's stamp, but the actual king's mark, pressed into crimson wax at the bottom. "Your presence is required at the capital. A royal escort will arrive in 3 days to ensure your attendance." Refusal is not an option. No explanation. No reason given. Just the command and the implicit threat. "They know," Sarah whispered to her empty cottage. "Someone told them about the bite, about what happened?" Magistrate Oren. It had to be. He'd seen Kale half-shifted in her garden, seen the northern pack appear to claim their prince. Despite his humiliation, or perhaps because of it, he must have reported everything to the capital, not to help the king, but to rid himself of the embarrassment and remove Sarah from the settlement entirely. Her mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Claiming a half-breed was probably illegal. They'd execute Kale for breaking some ancient law, and her for— what? Allowing it to happen? Surviving when she should have died? But she had no choice. Refusing a royal summons meant death. Sarah spent 3 sleepless nights packing the few possessions she couldn't bear to leave behind and arranging for Maris to watch over her cottage and patients indefinitely. At dawn on the 4th day, a royal guard arrived. Not Thornhaven's settlement watch, but actual King's Guard in their silver and blue uniforms. Sarah Ashenhart? The captain was a middle-aged wolf with cold eyes. "You'll come with us. Now." The 3-day journey to the capital was a waking nightmare. The guards refused to answer her questions, refused even to speak to her beyond barked commands. They traveled hard, stopping only when the horses needed rest. And every night, the pain episodes grew worse. On the 2nd night, Sarah collapsed while trying to set up her bedroll. White-hot suffering ripped through her spine, her bones grinding and reforming. She bit down on her sleeve to muffle her screams, terrified the guards would see her weakness and decide she wasn't worth transporting. Through the pain, she felt Kale's presence spike with alarm. Could he sense her suffering via their link? Was he somewhere in the world, feeling her torment as she felt his longing? "I'm sorry," she thought desperately, not even sure if he could hear her. "I'm sorry, I'm not strong enough for whatever this is." The response came not in words, but in warmth, a flood of comfort and strength that wrapped around her like arms she couldn't see. "Hold on," the sensation seemed to say. "Just hold on." By the time they reached the capital, Sarah could barely sit upright in her saddle. The city sprawled before them, massive and ancient, with the royal castle rising at its center like a mountain of white stone. But instead of taking her to the castle, the guards veered toward a different building, smaller but no less imposing, the Royal Academy of Sciences, according to the sign. Sarah's unease grew. They led her deep into the building's lower levels, down corridors lined with strange equipment and the acrid smell of alchemical experiments. Finally, they stopped before an ornate door. "Inside," the captain commanded. "Master Theron is expecting you." The room beyond was part laboratory, part library, with books and vials, SP covering every surface, and standing at a workbench, examining something that glowed with sickly green light, was a man in scholar's robes. He turned as Sarah entered, and she felt her blood run cold. Everything about him was sharp. Sharp features, sharp eyes, sharp smile that held no warmth whatsoever. "Ah, the half-breed who saved a prince," Master Theron said, his voice smooth as oil. "How fascinating. Please sit." Sarah remained standing. "Why am I here?" "Direct. I appreciate that." Theron gestured to a table where another body lay covered by a sheet. "I have questions about your healing methods. Specifically, how you cured a dying wolf of silverroot poisoning in a single night." Sarah's heart hammered. "I used traditional remedies, poultices, and—" "Don't insult my intelligence." Theron pulled back the sheet, revealing a wolf's corpse. The body was covered in dark veins identical to what had marked Kyle. This wolf received the exact same dose of silverroot as the prince, same concentration, same delivery method. He died within 6 hours, screaming in agony. He turned those cold eyes on Sarah. Yet Prince Kale not only survived, he recovered completely. No scarring, no lasting damage. "So tell me, half-breed, what did you really do?" Sarah's mouth went dry. "I told you. Traditional healing. You're lying." Theron moved closer, circling her like a predator. "I've spent 20 years perfecting silverroot poison. I know every cure, every antidote, and every possible treatment. Nothing works once the corruption reaches the heart. Nothing." 20 years. The words registered slowly. "You created the poison?" "Improved it," Theron corrected. "The original formula was crude, inefficient. Mine is elegant. Guaranteed to kill any wolf within hours." His smile widened. "Except apparently, when you're involved." Sarah backed toward the door. "I don't know what you think I did, but—" "I think you used magic," Theron interrupted. "Real magic. Not the parlor tricks most wolves call power. The kind that's been forbidden since the Purge 300 years ago." He leaned in close. "The kind that marks you as a witch." The word hung in the air like a death sentence. "I'm not—" Sarah started, but Theron raised a hand. "Spare me the denial. I can prove it, given time." He returned to his workbench, retrieving a small vial of that green glowing liquid. "But proof isn't why you're here. You're here because the king wants weapons." "Weapons?" "The northern pack grows too powerful," Theron explained casually, as if discussing the weather. "Prince Kale's father, Alpha King Aldrich, refuses to bend knee to human rule. So the king has decided that if wolves won't submit willingly, they'll be eliminated." Horror crawled up Sarah's spine. "You're planning genocide." "Don't be dramatic. We're planning pest control." Theron held up the vial. "This is my masterwork. Silverroot enhanced with binding agents that prevent shifting. 1 dose in a water supply and an entire pack dies human. Helpless." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you found an antidote to my poison." Theron's eyes glittered with cold calculation. "And I need to know what it is. If I can understand how you countered the silverroot, I can make it even more effective. Unbeatable. I'll never help you murder innocent people." "People?" Theron laughed. "They're animals. Half-breed. Clever animals, perhaps, but animals nonetheless. The world will be better once they're gone." He moved toward her with the vial. "Now, you can cooperate willingly, or I can force your cooperation. Your choice." Sarah ran. She bolted for the door, but guards blocked her path. Theron's laughter followed her as rough hands grabbed her arms. "Take her to the testing chambers," he ordered. "We'll extract what we need from her blood if necessary." They dragged Sarah down more corridors, her screams echoing off stone walls. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But it was. She was going to die here, and Theron would use whatever he learned from her to slaughter the northern pack. To kill Kale. The thought of Kale's death sent such anguish through her that Sarah's knees buckled. Via their link, she felt him react. Confusion, then sudden sharp alarm. He knows, she realized. He can feel my terror. The guards threw her into a cell and slammed the door. Sarah collapsed on the cold floor, her whole body shaking. Outside, she heard Theron giving orders. Something about bleeding her slowly, testing her responses to pain, seeing if trauma would trigger whatever magic she'd used. I'm going to die, Sarah thought. And I never even got to say goodbye. But even as despair threatened to drown her, she felt that warmth again via their connection. Stronger now. More urgent. Kale knew she was in danger. And somehow, Sarah was certain he was coming. The question was whether he'd arrive before Theron's experiments killed her. Time became meaningless in the cell. Sarah drifted between consciousness and fever dreams, her body racked with pain that had nothing to do with Theron's experiments, though those were horror enough. Twice daily, guards would drag her to the laboratory where the master alchemist would take blood samples, apply various toxins to her skin, and watch with clinical detachment as her body fought to heal itself. Fascinating, he'd murmur, taking notes. The healing factor is definitely enhanced beyond normal half-breed capabilities, but I still can't isolate the mechanism. What Theron didn't know, what Sarah barely understood herself, was that she was dying anyway. The bond was killing her. Or rather, her body's rejection of the bond was slowly tearing her apart from the inside. Her magic, that buried gift she'd spent her whole life suppressing, was at war with the wolf nature Kale's bite had awakened. Two forces, both powerful, both pulling her in opposite directions. She could feel it each time the episodes hit her, bones trying to shift, her magic forcing them back to human shape. An endless cycle of breaking and healing that was consuming her life force like kindling in a fire. You're dying, Theron observed on the 5th day, studying her with detached curiosity. Whatever you did to save the prince is consuming you. Ironic, really. Sarah didn't have the strength to respond. She barely had the strength to breathe. That night, curled on the cell floor, she felt Kale's presence more strongly than ever. His anguish flooded via their link, rage and helplessness and grief so profound it made her weep. Let go, she thought toward him, hoping he could sense her thoughts. I'm not worth this. Let me go. But the response came fierce and immediate. Never. Sarah woke to shouting. She dragged herself to sitting, her vision swimming. Outside her cell, guards were running, their boots thundering on stone. Alarms rang through the building, deep, resonant bells that meant only one thing: attack. The door to her cell burst open, but instead of guards, a massive wolf stood in the doorway. Silver gray, with eyes of liquid amber. Vyra? Sarah croaked. The wolf shifted, bones cracking and reforming until the tall woman from weeks ago stood there. But now her face was hard, her eyes blazing with fury. Can you walk? Vyra demanded. Sarah tried to stand, and her legs gave out immediately. Vyra cursed and scooped Sarah up as easily as if she weighed nothing. Hold on. They ran through chaos. The building was under assault, wolves in both human and animal form fighting the king's guard. Sarah caught glimpses of carnage, blood on white stone, bodies both wolf and human, the acrid smell of silver weapons mixed with the copper tang of death. Where's Kale? Sarah gasped. Where do you think? Vyra's voice was grim. Tearing through the castle looking for you. They burst into the courtyard, and Sarah's breath caught. Dozens of northern pack wolves filled the space, holding back guards with ruthless efficiency. And at their center, facing down Master Theron himself, stood Kale. He was fully shifted, not the half-form she'd seen before, but a complete transformation. The wolf was enormous, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with fur so dark it seemed to absorb light. His eyes blazed amber as he stalked toward Theron, a growl building in his chest that made the ground vibrate. Kale, no. Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper, but somehow he heard. His massive head swung toward her, and the change in his expression was immediate. The rage transformed into something equally intense but entirely different, relief and joy and desperate need all tangled together. He shifted mid-stride, bones cracking and reforming until he stood human again. Naked and seemingly unbothered by it, he ran toward her. Vera set Sarah down just as Kale reached them. He dropped to his knees, his hands hovering over her body as if afraid to touch, afraid she might shatter. "You're here," Sarah breathed. "How did you—" "Felt you," Kale said, his accent thick with emotion. He spoke common tongue now. Their bond had allowed him to understand her language, though speaking it was still new, still required effort. Through bond. Felt your pain. His hands finally settled on her face, infinitely gentle. "Thought I lost you." "You can't be here," Sarah said, even as she leaned into his touch like a flower seeking sun. "They'll kill you. Theron has weapons." "Let them try." Kyle's voice dropped to a growl. His eyes never left her face as he called out in that commanding tone, "Vira, get her out of here." "No." Sarah grabbed his wrist. "Don't stay, please. Just—" An explosion rocked the courtyard. Sarah looked up to see Theron standing on the building's upper gallery, holding a device that glowed with that sickly green light. More guards poured from every entrance, and these carried weapons Sarah had never seen. Strange crossbows that hummed with barely contained energy. "Prince Kale!" Theron's voice rang out. "How delightful. You've saved me the trouble of hunting you down." Kale rose, placing himself between Sarah and Theron. The protective gesture sent warmth flooding via their link. "Leave now," Kale commanded, his voice carrying alpha authority that made several guards flinch. "Or I kill everyone." Bold words. Theron gestured, and the guards raised their weapons. "But you're outnumbered, outgunned. And these new weapons?" He smiled. "They fire concentrated silver root? One bolt will drop even an alpha king." The wolves of the northern pack tensed, forming a protective circle around their prince. But Sarah could see they were outmatched. Too many guards, too many weapons, too much poison. "There's another option," Theron continued. "Surrender yourself, Prince. Come willingly for my experiments, and I'll let your pack leave unharmed, including the half-breed." "No," Sarah whispered, trying to stand. "Kale, don't—" But he wasn't looking at her. His attention was fixed on Theron, and Sarah felt via their link the calculation happening in his mind. He was actually considering it. "I'm not worth it," Sarah said desperately. "I'm dying anyway. The bond is—" "Dying?" Theron's interest sharpened. "Oh, this gets better and better. Your body's rejecting the claiming bite, isn't it? I wondered if that might happen with a half-breed." Kale's head snapped towards Sarah, his eyes wide with shock and horror. "What? Didn't she tell you?" Theron laughed. "Your little mate is tearing herself apart, her magic and her wolf nature at war. She'll be dead within a month, Prince. Maybe less." Sarah saw Kale's face crumple, saw the devastation hit him like a physical blow. Via their connection, his anguish crashed into her. Grief and guilt and rage all tangled into something unbearable. "No," Kale breathed. He grabbed Sarah's face in his hands. "No. We fix. We—" He struggled for words in common tongue, then switched to his native language, speaking rapidly. "Through their bond, there has to be a way. Some ritual, some magic. I won't lose you. I can't." "Kale," Sarah said softly, covering his hands with hers. "It's okay. I knew the risks when I saved you. I'd do it again." "Touching." Theron interrupted. "But irrelevant. Prince, your decision. Surrender, or I order my men to fire." The guards' weapons hummed louder, charging. Kyle looked from Sarah to his pack to Theron. Then slowly, he stood. "I surrender," he said clearly. "Let them go." "No." Sarah tried to grab him, but Vera held her back. "Kale, please." "Excellent choice." Theron signaled his guards. "Take him." But as the guards moved forward, Sarah felt something shift in the air. Power. Ancient and vast, building like a storm about to break. Kale's eyes blazed brighter, and when he spoke, his voice carried weight that made everyone freeze. I said, "Let them go first." It wasn't a request. It was a command that resonated with alpha authority, the kind that made lesser wolves submit without thought. Several guards actually dropped their weapons, compelled by sheer force of will. Theron's smile faltered. "What? You want to experiment on a wolf?" Kale took a step forward, and the air around him shimmered. "Then know what you're dealing with." He shifted again, but not into the massive wolf from before. This was something else. Something that made Sarah's breath catch and Theron's face go white. Kale's form expanded, growing larger, more powerful. His wolf shape twisted, taking on aspects that seemed impossible. Too big, too strong, radiating power that made reality itself seem to bend around him. "Sweet mercy," Vyra whispered. "He's accessing the ancestral form." "What does that mean?" Sarah gasped. "It means," Vyra said, awe and fear mixing in her voice, "that he's tapping into the power of every Alpha King who came before him. It means he's not just a prince anymore." The transformation completed, and what stood in Kale's place was a wolf the size of a bear, wreathed in shadows that seemed alive. His eyes burned like suns, and when he howled, the sound shattered windows throughout the complex. Guards ran. Theron stumbled backward. Even the northern pack wolves bowed their heads in instinctive submission to their true king. Then Kale spoke, and though his mouth formed wolf shapes, everyone understood. "You wanted to see what we are? This is what we are. Ancient, powerful, beyond your understanding. And you thought to cage us?" Theron tried to run, but Kale was faster. In 3 bounds, he'd crossed the courtyard. One massive paw slammed down, pinning the alchemist to the ground. "You poisoned my people, planned to slaughter packs, tortured my mate." The shadows around Kale writhed with barely contained rage. "Give me one reason I shouldn't end you now." "Kale." Sarah's voice was weak, but it cut through his fury. "Don't. Please. Don't let him turn you into a monster." The great wolf's head swung toward her, and Sarah saw the struggle in those burning eyes. The desire for vengeance warring with something else, the bond they shared, calling him back from the edge. Slowly, the shadows receded. Kale's form began to shrink, returning to his normal wolf shape, then finally to human. He stood over Theron, breathing hard, naked and covered in blood that wasn't his. "Go," Kale said to Theron, his voice rough. "Tell your king, tell everyone. Northern Pack is not prey. We are not animals to be hunted. Next time he sends assassins, I will not show mercy." Theron scrambled away, fleeing into the building. Kale turned toward Sarah, and she saw the moment the battle fury faded and reality crashed back. His face crumpled as he crossed to her, dropping to his knees once more. "Dying," he said brokenly. "You're dying because of me." "No." Sarah touched his face, feeling their connection pulse with his anguish. "I'm dying because my body can't handle what I am. That's not your fault." "Is my fault. My bite, my—" He struggled for words, then gave up and pressed his forehead to hers. Via their link, his thoughts flooded into her. "I claimed you knowing the risks, knowing you were half-breed. I was selfish, dying from poison, and I felt you. Your light, your strength, and I couldn't help it. Had to have you. Had to make you mine. And now you're dying because I couldn't control myself." "Kale," Sarah whispered, "I don't regret it. Even if I die tomorrow, I don't regret saving you. Don't regret what happened between us." "There has to be a way," Kale insisted. "Some ritual." "There is." Everyone turned to see an elderly wolf stepping forward from the northern pack. She was ancient, her hair pure white, her eyes clouded with age but sharp with knowledge. "Elder Mira," Vyra said respectfully. The old wolf approached Sarah, studying her with intensity. "The bond is incomplete," she said finally. "That's why she's dying. Her magic fights the wolf nature because the claiming wasn't finished properly. What do you mean? Kyle demanded. You bit her in fever, Mira explained. Your wolf claimed its mate, but you were half dead at the time. The bond formed but never sealed. She looked at Sarah. And you. Your magic has been suppressed your whole life. It's fighting the transformation because you've trained it to reject your wolf side. Then how do we fix it? Sarah asked desperately. Mira smiled. You complete the bond. Properly this time, under the full moon, with both of you conscious and willing. She gestured north. There's an ancient site in our territory, the First Grove, where the oldest wolves perform their claiming rituals. The magic there is strong enough to help your body choose, fully wolf or reject the bond entirely. But I'm half-breed, Sarah protested. I can't become fully wolf. You can, Mira said, with enough power channeled via the bond, but it will be painful. Your body will have to break down completely and rebuild itself. Most humans die from the shock. Most? Kale's hands tightened on Sarah. What are her odds? Mira's expression was grave. Perhaps 1 in 10 survive. Silence fell over the courtyard. And if we don't try? Sarah asked quietly. You die within 2 weeks, Mira said bluntly. Maybe less. The bond will consume you. Sarah looked at Kale, saw the desperation and guilt warring in his expression. She felt his thoughts clearly. I did this to you. I'll fix it. Whatever it takes. Okay, Sarah said. When do we leave? Now, Mira said. We've made enough enemies here. Best to put distance between us and the king's forces. As the northern pack began to organize for departure, Sarah felt Kale's arms close around her, lifting her gently. I've got you, he whispered. Whatever happens, I've got you. And despite the fear, despite the pain, despite the terrible odds they faced, Sarah found herself believing him. They fled the capital as dawn broke, guards too scattered to mount pursuit. The journey north took 3 days, each passing under the waxing moon that would reach fullness on their arrival. Perfect timing that felt less like coincidence and more like fate. And each day brought Sarah closer to death. The pain episodes had intensified until she could barely remain conscious. Twice, Kale carried her unconscious form as her body tore itself apart and healed in endless cycles. Someone in the pack had found clothing for him during their flight, and now he wore simple travel leathers as he cradled her against his chest. Hold on, he'd whisper, cradling her close. Just hold on, beloved. She felt everything via their connection, his guilt, fear, and desperate love. How can you love someone you barely know? She thought. The bond answered, because I know your soul. The northern pack territory was wild and beautiful, with ancient forests humming with magic. On the 3rd evening, they reached the first grove. The clearing was circular, surrounded by impossibly old trees. At the center stood a ring of standing stones carved with glowing symbols. The full moon rises in an hour, Elder Mira said. We need to prepare. Other pack members painted ceremonial marks on Sarah's skin, symbols to help channel the moon's power and ease the transformation. You'll survive, Vira said as she worked. Any half-breed strong enough to save our prince has strength for this. When preparations were complete, Sarah was led to the stone circle in a simple white shift. Kale waited at the center in ceremonial leathers decorated with silver thread, formal clothing appropriate for a prince performing a sacred ritual. His expression raw with love and fear. He caught her before she fell. You don't have to do this, he said urgently, speaking common tongue with only slight accent now. If you want to leave, Kale. Sarah placed her hand over his racing heart. I want this. I want you. He pulled her close, face buried in her hair. I'm terrified. If you die, then I die, knowing I was loved. The northern pack gathered at the clearing's edge. Elder Mira raised her arms as the full moon began to rise. We are gathered to witness a claiming, she intoned, to bind wolf to wolf, soul to soul. Moonlight strengthened, Sarah felt power gathering, making her wolf nature stir. Prince Kale, do you claim this woman as your mate? I do, Kale said without hesitation, taking Sarah's hand. She is mine, as I am hers. Sarah Ashenhart, do you accept this claim, knowing you may not survive? Sarah looked into Kale's eyes, deep blue now, beautiful and full of hope. I do, she whispered. Then let the claiming begin. Power flooded the circle. Moonlight intensified until almost blinding. Sarah gasped as it poured into her like liquid starlight. Now, Mira commanded. Complete the bond. Kale's hands cupped Sarah's face, tilting to expose her throat. His movements were deliberate this time. Reverent. I'm sorry for the pain, he whispered against her skin. Then his teeth found where neck met shoulder, and he bit down. Pain overwhelmed her, but Sarah didn't fight. She felt Kale's essence pouring through the bite. Their bond snapped into devastating completeness. Their minds merged. She felt his fierce love, guilt, desperate hope. He felt her acceptance, trust, and love she'd been too afraid to name. Mine, his consciousness growled. Yours, she agreed. And you are mine. Something fundamental shifted. Her wolf nature surged forward with savage joy. Her magic, instead of fighting, wrapped around the wolf spirit in embrace. Two halves of one whole. The transformation hit like a tidal wave. Bones shattered and reformed. Spine elongated. Muscles tore and rebuilt. Silver-white fur erupted across her skin. Her senses exploded. Smell, hearing, sight intensifying beyond imagination. Through it all, Kale held her. His arms kept her upright when she'd have collapsed. His presence in her mind soothed her screams. His love anchored her when she thought she'd die. I've got you, he promised. I've got you. The transformation completed. Sarah stood on 4 legs, fully wolf for the first time without fear. Sleek, powerful, and free. The pack howled in celebration. Sarah lifted her head and joined them, her voice blending in triumph and belonging. Kale shifted beside her, his massive dark wolf pressing against her smaller silver form. Enormous compared to her, yet she felt only rightness. Beautiful, his voice resonated clearly via their complete connection. My beautiful mate. Unable to speak yet in this new form, Sarah nuzzled against him, letting actions speak. The pack celebrated late into the night. Every time Sarah felt overwhelmed, Kale was there, constant presence in her mind and at her side. As dawn approached, Elder Mira approached. You should shift back now. Your human form needs to adjust. Sarah tried, but nothing happened. She looked at Kale in alarm. I can't, she thought desperately. I don't know how. Peace, Kale soothed. I'll help you. He shifted first, returning to human form. Then he knelt, placing his hand on her silver fur. Close your eyes. Reach for your human self. She's still there, buried under your wolf nature. Sarah searched inside herself. At first only wolf, instinct and freedom. Then she felt it, a spark of human consciousness. She reached for it, and the shift took her. Easier this time. Within seconds, Sarah knelt human and naked. Kyle wrapped her in his cloak, pulling her close. How do you feel? Sarah took inventory. The pain was gone. In its place was strength thrumming through every cell. Their link connected her to Kale so completely she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. Whole, she whispered. I feel whole. Kale's arms tightened. His relief and joy flooded via their bond. Thought I lost you, he said roughly. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Good. He pulled back to look at her face. Because now we perform the proper claiming ceremony, where I announce to the pack you're my mate, my future queen. Sarah's breath caught. Queen? You're mine, Sarah, which makes you a princess now. Eventually, when my father steps down, Alpha Queen. The weight threatened to overwhelm her. I don't know how to be a queen. We'll learn together. He pressed his forehead to hers. As the sun rose, painting the sky gold and pink, Sarah let herself believe it. A future where she belonged. The hours between dawn and moonrise passed in preparation, the pack gathering from distant territories, ceremonial items assembled, and ritual words rehearsed. The formal ceremony took place that evening. Sarah wore deep blue robes embroidered with silver wolves and stood beside Kale before hundreds of witnesses. Alpha King Aldrich performed the ceremony. The older wolf was imposing, gray-streaked and sharp-eyed. When he'd first seen his son alive, Aldrich had embraced Kale with tears streaming down his face. A private moment of reunion Sarah had witnessed from afar. Now, seeing her as Kale's chosen mate, she saw approval mixed with gratitude in his gaze. "Sarah Ashenheart," Aldrich intoned, "you have been claimed by my son. You survived the bonding. You've proven your strength. I accept you into the Northern Pack. I acknowledge you as my son's mate. I welcome you as future Alpha Queen." The pack erupted in howls. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. She had a pack now. A family. A place where her gifts were celebrated. Not feared. Kale took her hand, raising it high. "This is my mate. Any who threaten her threaten me. She is pack. She is kin. She is mine." The pack's response was deafening. Later, Kale led her to a private chamber in the royal residence. "Overwhelmed?" he asked. "Completely," Sarah admitted, moving to the window. In the distance, wolves ran free and wild. "A month ago, I was just a healer. Now I'm a princess?" "You're already everything you need to be," Kale said, arms wrapping around her waist from behind. Sarah leaned into him, feeling their connection pulse with contentment. "I'm still angry at you for biting me without giving me a choice." Kale tensed. "I'm sorry. If I could take it back—" "I didn't say I wanted you to take it back," Sarah interrupted, turning to face him. "I said I was angry, but I'm also grateful. Because if you hadn't, I'd still be in Thornhaven, hiding, pretending to be less than I am." "You were never less," Kale said fiercely. "You were always magnificent." Sarah smiled, rising to kiss him. The kiss deepened as their link flared, heat building between them. When they broke apart, Kale's eyes had gone amber again. "The bond intensifies everything," he said, voice rough, "including physical attraction." "Is that a warning?" "A promise." He cupped her face. "I've wanted you since you bought me at that auction. Since you healed me. Since you put yourself between me and danger." His voice dropped to a growl. "And now that you're mine, truly mine, I intend to show you exactly how much." He swept her into his arms and carried her to the bed. Much later, tangled in silk sheets, Sarah traced the claiming mark on Kale's shoulder, mirror to hers. "What happens now?" "Now we have forever." Kale pressed a kiss to her hair. "We build our life together. Rule together when the time comes. Face whatever challenges. Together." "Together," Sarah repeated. Word would reach them later through Vira's network that Theron had been arrested by the king's own guard, his experiments exposed by a brave whistleblower, going too far even for royal tolerance. Oren had been stripped of his position and exiled for his failure to recognize a prince of the realm, and for the false intelligence he'd provided that led to the disastrous confrontation. And Widow Maris had sent word via a traveling merchant. "The cottage is waiting when you're ready to visit, child. I've kept your garden well." She felt Kale's contentment. Despite everything, the pain, fear, near death, she wouldn't change a moment. It had all led here, to him, to herself, to home. "I love you," Sarah whispered. "And I love you, my heart, my mate, my queen." "My everything," he added via their bond. "My everything," Sarah agreed. In the safety of each other's arms, surrounded by pack and promise, they rested. Their connection sang with life and love, forged in pain and sealed in devotion, a bond that would last lifetimes. Sarah had saved a dying prince, spent her last coin on a stranger, and risked everything. And in return, he had given her the world.